Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Avoid a Power Surge with Effective Meetings. I am Roger Hayward, SUMA Vice President of Towns and Mayor of Nacum. Before we get into the session, I want to quickly note that the emergency exits and AED location are marked on pages 24 to 25 of your handbook. We want to make sure that our delegates are safe, so when you have a minute, please familiarize yourself with that information. And expect to be reminded of that a few more times throughout convention. We put your safety first for us. Please note that this session is being audio recorded. That means if you want to ask a question, we need you to go to the mic. Identify yourself and your municipality and speak clearly into it. Using the mic means that everyone in the room can hear you, including our speakers, and that the question is on the recording. Later this month, the presentations will be available on the SUMA YouTube channel, and we want to record these, want to have good recordings so we can get all your questions on there so you can review it later. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Gordon Wyatt with Solutions Consulting. Gord has managed small and large organizations, led senior management teams, and coached executive teams. He currently facilitates Municipal Management Essentials workshops for the Southeast College, which is part of a SUMA partnership to help members build capacity. For those of you with the event base, the free app we use for convention, you can read more about our presenters there. When you read those full bios, you can see the work these folks put into gaining the knowledge they're going to share with you here today. When we plan events for our members, we try to tailor the topics and speakers for your needs. Please give these folks your full attention and be open as to how their information can apply to your municipality. Some lessons are going to be easier to apply than others, but I'm sure everyone in this room can use these valuable nuggets of information when you go back to your office. Thank you for joining us today. Now, delegates, please give a warm welcome to Gordon Wyatt.
Thanks, Roger. And it's my pleasure to be here today and to spend the next hour and a quarter talking with you about a whole number of things that happen around council meetings. You're going to hear me talk about chairpersons, you're going to hear me talk about mayors. I'll use a whole lot of different terms somewhat interchangeably. How many of you are new councillors? Okay, we got a few. And how about new mayors? And we got a few of them too. So, you know, certainly whether you're new or whether you're experienced in your role as councillor or mayor, there is just a number of things that go on around a meeting, isn't there? There's a number of significant issues that you face. And I think at the first and foremost of that, what you really need to think about, whether you're a mayor, whether you're a councillor, whether you're a participant, is the need to plan for the event. We'll talk about planning techniques and activities surrounding planning a fair bit this afternoon. You probably have asked yourself, what do I do first? Where do I start? Particularly when you're new. Do you create an agenda? Do you create an invitation list? How are you going to run the meeting? Who's there to help? How do you prepare? Are there other people that can share some of the responsibility with you? Those are all valid questions that meeting managers face, and let's face it, a mayor is a meeting manager. You're going to manage the activity going on behind the scenes, help create the agenda, and you're going to obviously manage a lot of the activities that are going on during the meeting and perhaps after. So think about your own individual councils as I go through the material this afternoon. Find what might be relevant for you, find what you might be able to use, and hopefully that will help you develop even better meetings than what you might have right now. Power surge, interesting. You're going to have a negative power surge, and that'll sap your energy and take away from everything. If you have a positive power surge, on the other hand, those are refreshing events. Those are events that will help you move forward productively. So a few objectives for this afternoon. We're going to talk about planning and preparing for a meeting, identifying who the participants are, choosing a time and a place, Most of the time, your council meetings will be in council chambers, obviously, but there may be other times for special events that you move outside. We're going to talk a fair bit about creating an agenda and how to incorporate electronic options into your meeting. We'll talk about roles and responsibilities. I'll spend a fair bit of time talking about the different roles and responsibilities of the chairperson, of attendees, participants, and so on. We'll talk about chairing a meeting, dealing with disruptions. How many have disruptions during council meetings? Okay, not too bad. We'll talk about dealing with personality conflicts in a professional way. That's always a challenge. When you bring people together with diverse backgrounds, there's going to be differences in style, differences in personality. Sometimes that produces conflict. Sometimes that conflict is productive, other times it's completely negative. We'll talk a bit about taking minutes. How many CAOs are here today? Okay, good. You guys know how to do that. So I'll spend a bit of time on that, but not a lot. And we'll talk about a couple of little things that you can do to make your meetings a little more effective through managing your time a little differently. Successful meetings are planned events. They don't happen by accident. The need for a plan, absolutely essential. It's a roadmap. Shows where you started, where you're going, and indeed it also shows how you're going to get there. A guy I worked with once used to talk about if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And there's some truth to that, isn't there? Your plan is your roadmap. People, location, purpose of the meeting are all key factors. Who should attend? Planning and preparation for your meeting will disarm actions that will derail a meeting. It's called contingency planning. Having a plan in place just in case. And yeah, you can't spend all your time planning for the negative, because then for sure you'll never get to the positive. But it is really important to think about some of the things that can go wrong, some of the things that can happen when you're preparing for a meeting. So ultimately, what you want to have is a successful outcome and a good result. Participants, normally speaking, your council meetings, of course, are going to involve your mayor and council and the chief administrative officer, and maybe some other key staff as well. Can you hear me at the back okay? Yeah? Okay, good. So we're going to talk mostly here about invited guests, people who may not be normal participants at your meeting. Obviously, all your council members are going to be there, and so on. Determining meeting participants is a really important planning step. It's going to allow you to plan for time. It's going to allow you to plan for the event in such a way that you can be successful. Attendees can either help or hinder meeting dynamics. And in some circumstances, there is a tendency to invite a whole lot of people to a meeting, particularly if there's a change going on. You want to involve people in change. You want to have their voice. They want to know that they've been heard. So you invite a whole lot of people to this event. And then these whole lot of people, they sit around, they look at each other, and they nod their head. And you end up in gridlock. Groupthink. Everybody is sitting thinking about the same thing, even though I don't agree with what you just said. But I'm going to humor you because that's a good thing to do, right? So you walk out of those groupthink sessions and nothing happens. Watch out for groupthink. If you're thinking about a decision or a policy change that has an impact on your community, seek input a different way. You can do that through surveys. You can do it through focus groups, town hall meetings, whatever method that you want to choose. And once you've determined your meeting purpose, then you can start to list all the names of the various people that you do want to attend. And you can filter that list in terms of contributors and contributions. Choosing the time and place. There's a lot of considerations that you need to address when planning the time and place of your meeting. How many of you have evening council meetings? just about everyone. Does anybody have council meetings in the day? A small handful. There's a whole lot of complexities that need to be considered when you're planning meetings. Time away from jobs to attend council meetings is one of those. And I don't know how that you can get away from those kinds of issues. However, some organizations have, from time to time, taken a look and said, you know what, if Bob is going to serve on that particular board or council or whatever, our expectations as an organization are that we meet at 9 in the morning and we meet till 3 in the afternoon. We're going to say to his employer that we're going to pick up his costs. We'll pick up his salary, so that at least the employer, if they are able to let that person go to a meeting, knows that there will be no actual cost to them, and the employee is still made whole in terms of salary. Meetings that require energy and a high level of participation are best scheduled between 8 and 9 in the morning, not at 8 and 9 in the evening. And there's a whole lot of studies that have been done that'll back me up on that one. I can't quote them, but they're out there. I knew a council in a community once that actually had their council meetings at 7 in the morning before people had to go to work, when their energy levels were still up there instead of down there. I don't know how it worked. I don't know whether they're still doing it or not, but it was a different approach to the time for the meeting. They said, let's do it early. Let's do it earlier in the morning for 2 reasons. One is people are energized, they're ready to do something. Number 2, they've got an incentive, because at 8:30, a lot of them have to go to work. We're going to get productivity in the next hour, hour and a half. And you know what? If we can't do everything this time, we're going to table it for 2 weeks, and we'll approach it that time. If we run into other problems, maybe we'll have to have special meetings. But the time of day in relation to your get up and go is really, really important. I've gone to meetings at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night and sat there until midnight. Not only am I not very productive by 11 o'clock that night, I'm not that productive the next morning either. The next best time for a meeting is around 3 in the afternoon, after the midday lunch and the ensuing snooze zone that hits about 1:30 in the afternoon. How many of you experienced the snooze zone? Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yeah, you're just all ready to go, and all of a sudden, oh. I do workshops across Saskatchewan for Southeast, and one of the challenging times is 1:30 in the afternoon. We've all had lunch. We've all had a great time chatting through lunch and whatnot. Now it's time to get back to work, and you know what? I'm tired. It's human. It happens to us all. Location's important for meeting dynamics. Particularly if it's a special meeting. Obviously, if it's a regular council meeting, you're going to have the meeting in council chambers. That only makes sense. Perhaps if it's a special meeting, if it's a planning meeting, if you're looking at your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years, you might want to get off-site. A lot of organizations that I've had the honor to work for through the years, when we've gone into the strategic planning mode, we get off-site. There's a lot of good reasons for that. You get away from interruptions. You get away from the notion that, you know what, I've got to take that call at 9 o'clock or 9:30 or whatever it is, because it'll be Bob calling. Excuse me. I'm still getting over a cold, so if my voice starts to crack, it isn't because I'm young and entering puberty or anything. It's simply because I've had a cold. Location's important. Make sure your location is well lit, spacious, and so on. A couple of other things to consider: the need for privacy, particularly if it's a confidential type of a meeting. And if you are planning to have outside visitors attend your meeting, make sure that there's signage up so that people know where you are. If it's in the council chambers, that isn't going to be an issue. But again, if you're off-site, if you're doing some special work off-site, and you need to be able to tell people how to get there, or people need to know how to get there, make sure you tell them how to get there. Creating the agenda. The agenda is absolutely crucial document for the success of your meeting. In fact, if there was one particular item that I could leave you with that speaks volumes for how successful your meeting is going to be, it's in that whole agenda area. Creating it, managing it, delivering it, using it. The agenda is something, that's your roadmap. Simple as that. And you need to remember that insofar as possible. Tabling an agenda and then moving at a tangent off onto something else will derail your day in a hurry. Unfortunately, agenda planning often gets forgotten in the milieu of other activities that go on around a council meeting. It's likely I think it's safe to assume that the mayor and the CAO both play leading roles in setting the agenda. If that isn't the case, close that gap. There's a whole lot of things going on in the CAO's life in relation to fielding inquiries from the public and dealing with different issues that you need to know about. Conversely, the CAO needs your support in relation to filtering through all the information and getting the really salient topics on the agenda. The SOAP technique, seek topics from your participants. The best way to know what's important to people is ask them. You can ask them in a whole host of different ways. You can ask them through surveys, you can ask them through telephone calls and so on, but ask. Particularly important that you ask other members of council what the important topics are that should be considered by council. When you make the request, make sure you ask for any times that are needed to actually discuss the topic. I'll come back to timing later. Organize the topics into a list. Look for common denominators. If I ask 8 people for some input on something, I'm going to get a number of different answers. I might get 2 or 3 answers from each participant. I might get 16, 20, 24 different options. And if I look through those, I'm going to start to find some common denominators, some common themes. I'm going to find perhaps construction costs as being a common theme. And I might find something else. So start to narrow the funnel. Organize all that into a list. Review it, narrow it down more if you can. And then assess, evaluate which topics are relevant to the meeting purpose. Pick the number of relevant topics that'll fit into your time. Don't try to ram a square peg in a round hole either. And there's only so much time that's going to be available to you, whether it's 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours. I don't know what the time is. But in terms of putting criteria around how you're going to use that time, that's going to be dependent on what you try to accomplish. You try to accomplish too much in an inappropriately short period of time, you're going to fail. Failure is going to be a negative impact on your organization. That's a negative power surge. And if anyone has asked that a topic be included, then you're not able to contact that person and let them know. Like this, there's 2 ways of meeting difficulties. You alter the difficulties or you alter yourself in terms of how you meet them. Yeah, the difficulty is what it is. It's probably not going to change. What you can change is your perspective and how you approach a difficulty or a problem. Some of this is fairly straightforward. A lot of these different activities to bring material together falls to your administrative staff, the CAO and their support staff. But I think it's good that from time to time that all council members are aware of some of the complexities of preparing for a meeting. It doesn't just happen by magic. And that also includes making sure that the appropriate stationery is available. This is, I think, SHOWS shows. Nothing worse than going to a brainstorming session and there's no whiteboard or there's no flip chart or no markers. That's even the ultimate, probably, insult. The whiteboard and the flip chart's there, but there's no markers. Pretty hard to have a brainstorming session without being able to record what the impact or what the results of that brainstorming session are. Determine what's going to take place at the meeting and the materials needed to support it. Handouts, make sure they're prepared and circulated in advance. Don't provide a large handout at the meeting. Advance notice is critical. And there's all sorts of different organizers that are out there in terms of accordion files, agenda packages, and so on. How many are using tablets and so forth? Yeah. Becoming more popular all the time. Great way to organize information. Doesn't take much space. Only time it creates a paper jam is when you decide to print it all out. But it is a great way to organize things. Beware of the need for backup. And writing tools, I mentioned that before. Special requests. Sometimes presenters will make a special request, such as to present a poster. They pull up a great big poster, put it on the wall, and for the next 20 minutes, they talk about all the activities that are going on that are illustrated in the poster. So if there's going to be a poster presentation, make sure that you know about that. Again, most of this that I'm talking about right now applies to some of your administrative staff, and it might be more applicable to special event meetings as opposed to regular council meetings, but it's still worth thinking about. Sending invitations. Here's an approach that gives a consistent and clear method of structuring your meeting invitation. Meeting invitations are important, even for regular events. Purpose. State the purpose of the meeting up front and make sure that's mirrored in the agenda. You're not meeting just for the sake of meeting. If you are, there's something wrong. Be specific with your purpose. It's better to say budget planning for Q1 than it is to say budget planning. Place and time, self-explanatory for council meetings. Obviously, it's going to be at council chambers. Maybe different again for special event meetings, such as planning meetings. Avoid sending out invitations with a to be determined, a TBT message. Don't do that. As a recipient of those things from time to time, nothing speaks volumes to me more about how disorganized you are if you can't tell me where you're going to meet. We're going to have a planning meeting. We're going to invite 125 people. We don't know where we're going to have it. Speaks volumes. Be careful of that one. And packed. Try to, whoops, sorry. There it is. Create a sense of agreement with your participants. And even if this is just a regular council meeting, I think it's worth doing. A clear and concise information package that goes out to you as councillors sends a message that you're managing the meeting seriously. And again, I'm talking about the collaboration that's taking place between the chair and administrative staff. Set expectations for a high level of participation. No, you're not going to just come and sit and watch. You're going to come and participate. If you don't participate, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to single you out. And pretty soon you're going to know that as a chair of the organization, or a mayor or a reeve, whatever term you want to put on the chair, that I actually mean that. I'm going to ask Sam or Bob or Sarah or whoever for their opinion, because their opinion matters. It matters to the organization. It matters to the ratepayers. It matters to everybody. Your opinion counts. And if you don't express it, I'm going to ask you, create that pact, create that agreement, that sense of agreement and participation that should exist within a good team. And if anybody needs to cancel, make sure that that you set some parameters around cancellation times, that I know within a day that you're not going to be there. Logistical arrangements. Yeah, some of this is fairly straightforward. If you're off-site, particularly if you're off-site, do you need to make reservations for the room? How does it need to be set up, and if so, how? Do you have to contact the facilities department to make those arrangements? Are there people who are traveling? Do they need any assistance with travel arrangements? And if you do have security in the building, you need to make security aware of your visitors' presence so that they're not held up at the door. Food, obviously, if you're going to cater to the event, make sure that you've got an appropriate caterer, and that's planned for. Audiovisual, I'll talk a little more about that later. Do you have, in terms of electronics though, do you have anything that you need to get placed into the meeting room? Are you savvy enough in technology to troubleshoot any problems that might come up? Do you need a projector screen, computer, so on? Is that available? Do you need a sound system? And if you need signage made to point people in the right direction to where your event is that available? I like that too. Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them. Moves away from blaming. Moves into the area of active participation and engaging people in improving things together, finding the solution to a problem in a collaborative kind of an environment instead of a we-they blame environment. Really important, powerful stuff. Basic essentials to setting up in your meeting: tables, power, water, whiteboard. Is there a projector? Make sure the room is located in an appropriate area. And make sure you get to the meeting place, if you're the meeting organizer, early enough, giving you time to deal with unexpected surprises. They will be there, invariably. The projector doesn't work, the laptop doesn't work, something doesn't work. Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. Plan for it, prepare for it. And that way you're not surprised. And that way it's not a negative surge on your meeting. There's a few extra touches you can provide depending on the type of meeting that you're going into. Name tents, welcoming messages. That's particularly useful in special meetings. A welcome message to whatever the event might be. A keepsake, signage, visual aids. Depends on the audience, depends on the situation. You can plan accordingly for that. Yeah, a physical arrangement, that will vary in relation to the type of event or the type of meeting that you're going into. If it's your usual council meeting, it's going to be your usual council table, and you're going to be seated around it with people in their appropriate positions. If it's a special meeting, that may well change. Conference style seating is good for short meetings with less than 30 people. Typical council meeting. It's also useful for small training sessions and close interactions. The U-shape seating, the horseshoe, is effective where you want more face-to-face interaction. When people do training events with groups of up to, I'm going to say up to 25 or 30, that horseshoe arrangement is useful. It lets the facilitator really be with everyone. We're too large a group today for me to be walking around talking. When I do smaller groups of 15, 20, 25, whatever, I do that. I don't stand at the front and drone on. I walk around and I talk with people. I get to know you. I get to know what your problems are. I get to know what your interests and your expectations are. And that way, we can start to have a more productive kind of a dialogue. And you can do that in a small training meeting or session with your council and staff as well. You can start to engage people and engage them differently. Engage them in a participatory environment. Boy, that's a tough word to say. Engage them in an equal kind of an environment. There's no we and they when it comes to managing your council or delivering the goods and being accountable to the people that elected you. There's no we and they, it's just us guys and gals. T-shaped seating. involves setting up the tables sort of in a T shape. It's used for face-to-face and large group meetings. Also allows for leaders to sit at a cross point, and of course classroom style is best when learning is going to take place and participants need to take notes. There's tables in front of them and so on, and that's useful for large and small groups. The physical arrangement of the meeting room should always focus on providing a comfortable setup where everyone is able to view the presenter, and the presenter isn't hidden around a corner or a great big telepost. Some examples of different activities: planning meeting, conference style setting. A whole lot of people are coming out to talk about a community plan or a community planning session. You're going to have 75, 80, 100 people. Yep, setting like this is great. Council orientation or training. That's when we start to move into a U-shape or even a classroom style. I would say U-shape for a small group like that. A strategic planning session or sharing meeting, T-shape might work, depends how many senior staff or executives are there, or where you see yourself as council in relation to the rest of the community. Project update, if you had some people coming in for Public Works to talk with you about some problems that they have been working on and how they're solving them, a U-shape could be pretty powerful there, where the director or manager of Public Works and one or two of his staff could interact with you. The conventional definition of management is getting work done through people, but real management is developing people through work. Technological advancements give a whole lot of options to how we communicate and store information. The sky's the limit, isn't it? There's a ton of choices. If used properly, this kind of technology has let us reach out past the meeting room and into the virtual world. You can connect with people anywhere, anytime, about almost anything. It expands our ability to share information and to record it. There's a whole lot of examples. This is on Microsoft PowerPoint, this presentation. And there's a whole whack of things going on behind the scenes. There's notes that are pulled together. There's previews that are available. Probably a lot of you have used it. It's a great organizer. However, I've learned the hard way. I come with paper too, just in case that there's a malfunction at the junction. Have a contingency plan. Web meeting programs, similar to Microsoft Live Meeting or GoToMeeting. How many of you use GoToMeeting? It's a well-known one. Yeah, really, really effective way of sharing what's on your desktop, what's in front of you, with participants anywhere. Video conferencing, how many of you use that? Yeah, another powerful method. Dedicated line with cameras and TV screens to connect 2 or more remote spots. It's getting better all the time. I really like video conferencing, actually. It's one of my favorites because I get to see who's there. I get to see their reactions. I get to see their body language. Remember that in the absence of, or if there's a disagreement between what I tell you and what I say through my body language will be the one that you believe. That's the one that will always come forward first. And if I can watch something on a video screen, I start to get that same interaction. I can see that Bob is really confused by what I just said, and he needs some clarification. And the last one, the good old audio telephone conference, dedicated telephone line and so on, where somebody, 16 people are on a teleconference and 13 of them have put their phone on hold and the other 3 do all the talking. Anybody experienced that? Yeah. Some things to consider in technology. Number 1 is your ability to manage that technology. Many things will affect the performance of these tools. You need to be comfortable enough with technology to deal with the unexpected and avoid the embarrassing results that can happen from that. Make sure your IT provider, if you've got one, is with you before you start bringing that kind of information in. Test the system. Make sure your information, your IT department supports them. Test, test, test. Practice, practice, practice. When it comes to these sorts of things, I don't think you can practice or get ready for it enough. Before you try using that new tool, get some training and practice. Avoid using technology just for the sake of using it. You're not going to impress anybody. Quick list of things to consider if you plan to use new technology. Again, is the complexity of adding the technology outweighing the potential glitches? Is the cost benefit positive? Can you handle issues that might arise? Is your audience capable of handling the technology and benefiting from it? Have you adequate support from the IT department? Are there costs that you need to consider? Software costs and so on. Making a final decision. Are you proficient with the technology? Are others capable of using the technology and benefiting from it? And do you have the budget to support it? If you answer no to any of those questions, you might want to think about the risk that's associated with going ahead and using technology just for the sake of using it. Make sure you have training you need well in advance, that you've tried it out, that you have someone there as a technical assistant if technology is going to be used. Use can't avoid it. Role of the chairperson, minute taker, or recorder, and attendees. Each one of those people have a key role to play in your meeting. We'll start with the chair or the mayor. As I said earlier, you'll hear me use mayor and chairperson or chair interchangeably. It's one of the same. The role of the chair is key in maintaining the flow of the meeting, staying within reasonable boundaries, and conducting business efficiently. Absolutely key. Effective chairs or mayors chairing a meeting stay focused on the tasks associated with their role. If you select someone else to be chair in your absence for whatever reason, make sure that that person knows in advance about the agenda, is comfortable coordinating it, and that will give you the opportunity to set your expectations with that person. You want to avoid miscommunication during the meeting. Miscommunication will hurt the credibility of the chair, of the person designated as the chair, and ultimately will affect the credibility of yourself, your council, and may well filter into your community. The chairperson mayor, some basic duties, and some of them are more than basic, is responsible for directing the proceedings of the meeting. He's the quarterback. Is the time manager. He's a referee and enforcer of rules. Must be confident in the person he or she may defer the role to in the event that they cannot act. Must be able to lead the meeting and be firm throughout the meeting. Must be aware of the rules of the meeting and must make sure that those rules are managed. Must keep to the aim or objective of the meeting, doesn't get off on sidetracks. Remains fair with everyone. Calls the meeting to order, obviously. Transitions from one topic to the next. Introduces presenters and handles disruptions. Some of the qualities a good chair has. They should be comfortable with the extent of their authority and not abuse the authority. Yes, they have a lot of authority, absolutely no doubt about it. They need to be comfortable with that. They need to know that. They must not abuse it. That sounds interesting. Must be a meeting. They must be able to demonstrate flexibility, remain impartial, display maturity, and they must be adept at time allocation and keeping people on track and on task. The minute taker, CAOs will be familiar with most of this. Good minute taker has great listening skills, pays attention to detail, has excellent writing and communication skills, and must be able to maintain focus and not be drawn into side conversations. Someone who's not normally is someone who is not directly involved in the meeting, not an active participant. You're there to support as opposed to participate. Before the meeting, here's a list of some of the things that a minute taker does. Before the meeting, determine what tool you're going to use, whether it's laptop, paper, recording, or so on. Become familiar with who's attending. Make sure you have a copy of the agenda and be familiar with it. I would certainly hope so. During the meeting, take attendance. Note the time the meeting begins. Record the time of adjournment. I'm going to go back to that one in a few minutes about time of adjournment. Record main ideas presented in the meeting and who the contributor is. Record motions, obviously, mover, seconder, abstentions, outcomes, follow-up items, items to be discussed at the next meeting, and so on. After the meeting, prepares the minutes, proofreads them, and distributes them. Attendees. And when I say attendees, I mean, in this case, probably all other council members. Participants. Everyone attending has a responsibility in the meeting setting. You have a responsibility, I'll go into it in a little more detail in a minute. And as chair, you can't force the responsibility of your attendees, but you can sure influence it and you can manage it. If I, as chair, see that you are disengaged, that you are somewhere that you shouldn't be, I have the responsibility and I have the authority to bring you back. Bob, what is your opinion? Bob, you've been very quiet this afternoon. I'm concerned that your mind is elsewhere. I've done it. I haven't served on a council, but I've served on a lot of boards, and I've occasionally had to chair them. And that's something that you do. Because you need everybody's full participation. You don't just need bodies filling filling chairs. You need everybody's attention. Be prepared for the meeting by, The attendees are the biggest success factor of your council. Everyone, councillors, mayor, are going to contribute to the success of your organization, of your council. Setting expectations is a proven way to communicate the role of attendees. It can be done either in a meeting invitation, a separate email, or through policy. That's my preferred route. Policy of the town of wherever is the following, and you lay out the expectations for behavior. You can do that in many ways. You can also have a code of ethics. When people start to violate the code of ethics, you can call their behavior. All participants play a vital role in your meeting, and you need to, as chair, remind them of their role and responsibility and call out inappropriate behavior. Here's some responsibilities for everybody attending a meeting. Prepare. Be prepared to contribute in the meeting. Be prepared to arrive early and avoid being late. Be prepared for the meeting by listing ideas and questions ahead of time. Don't just dream them up. Be prepared by reading the agenda and supporting information, the minutes of the last meeting, the financial statements, other reports and pieces of information that are coming forward to you, perhaps from Public Works, wherever. Be informed. Participate by asking questions, taking notes, and sharing ideas. There's no such thing as a stupid question, only a stupid answer. Get your ideas out. Don't be afraid to share them. Be productive. Avoid carrying on side conversations. How many of you have seen side conversations? Avoid distractions like cell phones And, I mean, cell phones are a way of life. They're here. They're not going to go away. But there can still be some expectations laid out on how you use or don't use a cell phone for the next couple hours. Stay to the allotted time on the agenda and don't grandstand. And don't reward grandstanding behavior. Oops. There go the people. I must follow them, for I'm their leader. You've also heard the saying, you can lead, follow, or get out of the way. And what you do largely is up to you. So are we leaders or managers? Management is efficiency and climbing the ladder of success. That's how we move up the organization. It's how we deal with the different things that happen within the company. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. One of Covey's quotes. Signals, S-I-G-N-A-L-S, is a kind of an interesting way to maybe get off on the right foot at some meetings, particularly where there's invited guests or it's a meeting for a special occasion. Salutations, how you open the meeting. You welcome and greet your participants. It's great to be here this afternoon. Welcome, everybody. For the next 2 hours, we're going to talk about the business of XYZ community. Introduction is where you introduce who you are. Obviously, it's redundant if you know everyone. At a regular council meeting, you're not going to stand up and introduce all the councillors that are in the room unless it's their first time there. Welcome, new members. Guests mentioned, if you are going to introduce any special guests, that's the place to do it. Need to know is a list of things like where the bathrooms are, what happens if there's a fire, and so on. The agenda is where you discuss the purpose of the meeting and give a brief overview of the agenda, of the document that's going to guide you through your meeting. Laws of the meeting, rules of the road. That's how we're going to conduct business. And some organizations cover that in many different ways. Code of ethics, code of conduct. Code of conduct is a really interesting way to approach that, where the rules of the road are laid down in that code of conduct, and every year people sign it. No matter how long you've been on council or how long you've been a mayor or a CAO of an organization, you sign the code of conduct, something like signing a confidentiality agreement. And when it's signed, there's usually 10 minutes given, just reminding people of the consequences for not following the code of conduct. You can then branch into a code of ethics as well. And SEGU, of course, is a part of the of your introduction that links that part of the topic to the next topic, which in this case, after you've talked about salutations and introductions and so on, is the role of the agenda for the meeting. You'll develop a style that you're comfortable with in relation to going through all these steps. And that's fine. That's and it's fine because that style will be you, and you'll be comfortable with that, and that'll give a lot of positive reaffirmation to what's happening at your meetings. No matter what style you adopt or what you choose to use it, practice it, become proficient at it. The role of the agenda. We're back to the agenda again. Simply handing out the agenda at a meeting doesn't communicate its role. I think I hope in almost every case, the agenda is circulated well in advance of the meeting. And it isn't just passed out when you walk in the door. Introducing the agenda is similar to introducing someone with a role in the meeting. It's an entity that needs to play a vital role, and you shouldn't ignore it. It's powerful stuff. That's your planning document. That's where you're going today. And if you ignore it, do so at risk of things going south on you. Ignoring the agenda will lead to time and participant management problems, and eventually you may run off the rails. Consistently missing agenda times and topics is a sign of poor meeting management. It's not something you want to be remembered for. Here's a list of items the agenda accomplishes when handled correctly. It communicates meeting topics, presenters, time allocations for each speaker or event in the agenda. You can time whatever you want on that agenda. Financial statements presentation, whatever time seems appropriate. Review draft budget 2019, whatever time seems appropriate. Minutes of last meeting, adopt minutes of last meeting. That should be a fairly quick consent item. That should not be something that you're going to debate for the next hour. That will put a negative surge into your meetings. If minutes are circulated in advance, and when people come to the meeting, either number one, they haven't read the minutes, or number two, they dredge things up from the past, you will go down a road you don't want to go down. And that will be in perpetuity. You will continually talk about the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Einstein's definition of insanity. I've been very, very fortunate. A lot of the boards that I've served on in the past, minutes were always circulated in advance. It was expected in our code of conduct that we would be fully conversant with what was there, and that discussion around the minutes would be minimal. Around passing the minutes would be minimal. If there was agenda items that needed to be discussed today from last month's meeting, from the minutes, they would be on the agenda. Minutes are, we'll talk about minutes in a few minutes. Hey, there we are. Talk about minutes in a few minutes. They're a retrospective review of what happened at the last event. Anyway, the agenda communicates meeting topics, presenters, and time allocations for each topic. And it provides focus by stating the meeting objectives clearly, outlining the meeting in increments of time, and providing a checklist of things that you want to accomplish. It also allows people coming to the meeting, councillors, to see both the beginning and the end of the meeting, avoiding distractions and ambiguity. Call to order and time of adjournment. Your agenda can contain a time of adjournment. You can also use a parking lot. It provides a place where topics that can't be answered during the meeting are sent temporarily. It's meant for topics that might need follow-up later. And it's also a great place to take contentious items that you need more information on and give them a resting place. There, let's put them in the parking lot. Gordon and Bill, or whoever, will do some background investigation on that topic and report back to council at the next meeting. The chair will review the parking lot to determine if the topic requires follow-up later, and communication on follow-up. The results will be sent to everyone, obviously. It's helpful to manage activities that need extra time. If you need to find a way to find some time in your meeting because it's bogged down in certain discussions on a topic, put that topic in the parking lot. Park it until you can get more information about it and how to manage it. Keeping the meeting on track. It's a real dilly, isn't it? Side conversations, distractions, and so on can get you off a topic in a hurry. STOP, set expectations. Let your presenters and attendees know, let everyone know that you intend to actively manage the agenda. You're the chair, you're going to manage the agenda. And that means you're going to manage time, or the allocations of time. If you don't do that, if I suddenly surprise you by saying, you know what, your presentation's gone way over, and I didn't tell you that you only had 10 minutes to start with, it's going to be quite a shock, isn't it? You state all of that up front, and then I hold you to account for that. Set expectations for questions and answers. Defer questions to the end of a presentation. We're not doing questions along the line today. We're going to do questions at the end. Time the presenter. I'm being timed. If I don't pay attention to my time, I know that Roger is going to probably remind me of the need to move on. Overcome the fear of interrupting. A lot of us see interrupting as rude and find it a difficult thing to do. You can overcome that by setting expectations up front. And warn people about time constraints. If I'm going to give Sam 20 minutes, I need to warn, and he's at 15 minutes, and he's probably got 10 minutes left, I need to warn him that, you know what, your time is, is coming to an end. If you have to extend the agreed upon time for the meeting, if you go into overtime, a few things need to happen. You need to let people know in advance as much as possible that we got a lot of topics to talk about today, and there is a chance that we may go over. And once the meeting extends beyond its original end time, you're going to lose people's attention, particularly in large meetings. The mind can only accept or absorb what the behind can bear. The goal in managing overtime is to acknowledge it before it starts, look at the agenda, and determine if you think you're going to go past the time of adjournment. If you do, then there's some things you can do to manage the impact. And there's some things you should check for too, particularly if it's a special meeting off-site. Make sure that you've still got the room, that you can have the room later. Are the people that need to travel? Do they need extra time to do that? Let people know in advance that the meeting is going to run over. If it's a small meeting, gain consensus to do that. Give people choices. In large meetings, take a break at the end of the normal time so that those that have to leave can do so. Likewise, in a small meeting, if you need to let people leave at the end of the normal time allocation, just simply let them do that. If going over isn't an option, if you can't go beyond 9 o'clock tonight, determine what agenda items are going to be missed and plan for an alternative way of getting the information to people, whether it's through email, another meeting, whatever. Improperly managed overtime creates a lot of frustration and disconnection amongst people. Holding people accountable. It can be really tough to hold participants accountable in a meeting. And again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody chairing a meeting, the mayor chairing a meeting, and the councillors that are there. Participation, productivity, and preparedness can all be easily overlooked. It's really tough to do. At the heart of it all, holding your participants accountable involves solid communication. There's 3 basic steps that you can take to holding people, your participants, everyone accountable. Set your expectations. Lay them out. The invitation outlines what you expect from the participants in the meeting. If you need them to bring questions, make sure they've done that. Encourage active, informed participation. Outline expectations so that you can hold people accountable when they don't meet them. Let people know that you're going to be asking for their input. Clarify consequences. Let people know how you plan to hold them accountable. You might simply let them know that you're going to be calling on everyone for answers. If I'm doing a small session of 10, 15 people, I'm going to let them know right up front, you know what, I'm going to ask some questions or ask for feedback at some point in time. If I don't get any, if I don't get it twice, I'm going to start asking you or you or you. Because I want to know. We need to know. The group needs to know how everyone is thinking in order to make a good, informed decision. And follow through. If you said you're going to do something, then do it. Mean what you say and say what you mean. Don't make empty threats. Generally speaking, people don't want to be seen in a negative light. They want to contribute, and sometimes they don't know how. That's up to you as chair, as leader, to tease that information out of people who are a little less apt to come forward. People are afraid to speak up for a number of reasons. Some of it is learned behavior, some of it is experiences from the past, some of it is, gee, do I really know? Effective communicators help those people come out of their shells. And one of the most effective ways is letting them know that, you know what, no matter what your answer is, it's okay. You're okay. I'm okay. We're all okay. This isn't a we-they thing. And that's particularly important, I think, when council and mayors are dealing with the staff, is that this is a partnership. This isn't we-they. This is us. We all have a role to play. We all have something to contribute in the organization, whether I'm mayor of the community, whether I'm a councillor for Ward 5, or whether I'm the one of the guys that runs the garbage truck. We're all there for a reason. We're all there to make this community better. Build on those partnerships. Communicate that. You'll never go far wrong. How many, whoops, this thing really clicks fast. There are only two words that will always lead you to success. Those words are yes and no, and they should be treated equally. If you've mastered saying yes, practice saying no. If you've mastered saying no, practice saying yes. They should be treated equally. How many have had to deal with disruptions during meetings? Running in and out, that's a dandy, isn't it? Somebody is constantly coming and going. The meeting's going to last 3 hours, and Bob left 15 times and came back 15 times. Might have been better if he'd left once and didn't come back. Who knows? Those kinds of disruptions are really, really aggravating. They're distracting and really take away from the flavor, from the culture, the atmosphere of the meeting. Dealing with this kind of behavior, with running in and out, use the sit technique. Set expectations, incorporate frequent breaks, and give timely feedback, or timely feedback is given to those who break the rules. Lay out your expectations. Tell people at the beginning of the meeting what you expect of them when it comes to staying in the room. Your expectations are, other than an emergency, you're going to be here for the next 3 hours. We're going to have breaks at an hour and a half. If there's an emergency that comes up, yeah, you can leave. And incorporate breaks, even if they're only 5-minute breaks. If you're going into a long session, in particular, I find that I'll throw in an extra break, probably 5 minutes at 1:30, 1:45. Even if it's only 5 minutes to get up, walk around the room, stretch, grab a coffee, sit down again. It breaks that lethargy that hits all of us after lunch. And give timely feedback to those who break the rules. When you have somebody who's still running in and out, you need to address it. Don't let the behavior continue. Don't reward inappropriate behavior. Cell phones and pagers, yeah, we talked about that a bit before, pretty basic standard stuff these days. Put up a sign, make an announcement how you expect cell phones to be handled. Put a reminder on the agenda, right across the agenda as a header, about how you're going to manage cell phones. People that are off on a tangent, this is a dandy. This happens. It happens in, I think, any organization that I've ever worked in, and I've worked in quite a few of them, and any that I've ever served on. People get off on tangents, and it's a tough one to manage. The biggest challenge is basically to redirect that person without offending them. Because sometimes, almost always, people that are going off on a tangent aren't deliberately trying to sabotage you. They aren't deliberately trying to put that negative surge into your meeting. They may be excited about something. They've just thought of something. They're spontaneous people. They want to share it. They've thought of something that's going to make life better for someone else, and they want to share it. They've thought of, what if we do this? And they what if it to death. It's something like me waking up at 3 in the morning when I was thinking about doing this presentation last night. I'm thinking, what if, what if, what if? When that behavior starts, engage the contributor. Just for a minute. Can I use your name? Diane, I find that idea very interesting. Can we pursue it a bit? I engage you briefly. And I've acknowledged that it's worthy of discussion, and I'm interested in it. And we enter into maybe a 30-second discussion. And I summarize by saying, you know what? You've bought a lot of things out in that. Let's put that into the parking lot. And we'll go forward with that next week. Now, I've bought you back. I've engaged you. I have not offended you, hopefully. And we've set a goal for how we're going to manage what your topic is, what your expectation of that topic might be. It's not hard to do. Some people, you'll have to work at it a little harder because they will start saying, yeah, what if, but. Stop the buts. If you say but, the person only remembers what you say after the word but. So when you respond, don't use the word but. Acknowledge the behavior, be a contributor, or acknowledge the contribution, be a contributor, gain their assent, and then redirect back to where we are at hand. We'll focus more on that next week. Let's go back to quarter 2 budget results. Another tough one. Maybe even tougher than off on a tangent, unless there's a personality conflict with the people that are off on a tangent. And this usually will be not you as chair, or even you as a council member interacting with a mayor or with a CAO. It will likely be 2 peers that are in conflict. 2 councillors, 2 participants that came to the meeting because of an invitation, because of some issue, and they go off on a wild tangent. That's not only a tangent, it's a pure case of, I don't like you, and you don't like me. And away it goes. I did a workshop recently where an individual was describing one of these situations, and he actually had to separate 2 combatants. Scary stuff. And it's really unfortunate that personality conflicts can get to that stage. Underlying it all is anger, no doubt. And anger, of course, is a secondary emotion, secondary to a whole lot of things, secondary to fear, misunderstanding, ambiguity, disappointment, and so on. I could go on that subject for an hour. Managing personality conflicts, if you've got a new council, you're going to have some new councillors that are storming together as the new council forms. It's normal. Help it happen in a respectful way. Because after the storming and the forming is over with, then you get into norming, where activity becomes normal. If you have conflict in a meeting, it must be managed. Yeah, you're going to have some tension when people are debating different positions and different ideas. I don't normally agree with everyone, but there's a way to disagree. And sometimes you just simply have to agree to disagree and move on for the sake of the common good of the council or the town. When tension turns to outright conflict, the focus turns from the meeting to the spectacle. It's no longer the meeting, it's the spectacle. Your job as mayor or chair is to diffuse that conflict and restore order in the meeting. Stop, drop, and roll. Stop the conflict by intervening. Avoid taking sides. Remain calm. Don't yell. Simply state the discussion has turned personal and it needs to end. Drop. Instruct the parties in conflict to drop the discussion. This is not the time and place for this kind of interaction. Take a breath, you guys. Take a time out. Go to your corners. Roll into a break. Even if you just had one, go to have another one. And during that break, find these two people and let them know that what's going on is going to end. The kind of behavior during a council meeting is unprofessional, improper, probably against any code of ethics that anyone has ever read or code of conduct. If there's that kind of a conflict, if there's this kind of a deep conflict about different ideas and philosophies within council, maybe there's something else that needs to happen. Maybe you need to do some conflict resolution training. That's a separate issue altogether. You can't do that at a council meeting. Taking minutes, briefly. What are minutes? They're the legal happenings, or legal proceedings of what went on at your meeting. They record major points, decisions, follow-up actions that are as a result of the meeting. They serve as historic data, particularly useful in succession planning. If you've got a new CAO coming into the organization, he or she is likely going to have asked to have a look at the minutes of the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. They're going to look for trends, they're going to look for different challenges that are ahead, and so on. Minute taker, as I said before, shouldn't have a major part in the meeting itself. When taking notes, don't become bogged down with writing down all the details. Get the salient topics. That's what's really important. Date, time, and place, action items, motions, of course. Next meeting items, non-resolved items. You can use a take-home template. There's all sorts of them out there. Gives a bit of a consistent approach to how you record your minutes. Saves time. There's an example: topic, discussion, action, person responsible. I would find that, that kind of a template really useful in a management committee or a senior management team. Nice little quote there. Greatness is not a function of circumstance. Greatness, it turns out, is largely a matter of conscious choice and discipline. Meetings can be perceived as pretty boring events, can't they? There are also places of, I think, endless possibility where you can dare to dream and start to dare to create a better future for your community, for those you work with, for those you serve. How you do that is largely up to you, as long as you do it within certain parameters. You can incorporate a whole lot of different elements into your meetings, which can make them more interesting. Perhaps part of that is, I've heard of some organizations doing it as a lunch and learn opportunity. There's a short, a speaker comes into a council meeting perhaps over the supper hour and delivers a short message on some particular topic that is important to you, that is important to your community. 50-minute meeting. A lot of our electronic day timers and so forth chunk out time for us in increments of 15 minutes. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And a lot of it defaults to an hour. So when we go from meeting to meeting, we have no time in between to take a look at our email or check our text, or check our voicemail. So the 50-minute meeting, and this may not be too appropriate here, but it's worth thinking about anyway. The 50-minute meeting gives you that bit of time between meetings to kind of recharge the batteries, to make sure that you haven't got a really important phone call that you got to return, to have a quick look at your email. And for the 50-minute meeting to be effective, have an agenda. There's no sidebar conversations. You summarize action steps and you send out summary notes. some of the places I've worked, we used to use tailgate meetings. They were roughly 20 minutes. And if there was a truck handy, you sat on the tailgate. There was never a truck handy, so you stood up. And for the next 20 minutes, you talked about some immediate issues that were in your workplace or your department. If it was on the assembly line, you talked about the issues that were on the assembly line, and you brought forward some ideas on how to make things better. Just a few quotes to close on before we move into questions. Our meetings are held to discuss many problems which would never arise if we held fewer meetings. Interesting little contradiction in there, isn't it? Meetings are a symptom of bad organization. The fewer meetings, the better. I don't agree with that. It's a fact of life that today we're going to have meetings, whether they're council meetings, whether they're credit union board meetings, whether they're meetings of the board of directors of Southeast College, whether they're management meetings, whatever they are, right, wrong, or otherwise, we're in the world of collaboration. It's not a bad place to be. The individual who is habitually tardy in meetings and appointment will never be respected or successful in life. Yeah, maybe some words of wisdom in that one. I've got another one to add. I heard it first at a workshop a long time ago. I hate to say how many years ago. It was likely 1988, 89, 90, somewhere in there. There was a lot of things going on in the organizations that I worked in those years. And the speaker, I remember his name was Alan Simmons. I have no clue whatever became of Alan Simmons. He was a motivational speaker, and he could do a pretty good job of it. And his close was this: if you say what you've always said, if you do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. If you say what you've always said, if you do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Thank you. Questions?